Before we begin, if you love epic HFY sci-fi, tales where humanity defies impossible odds against alien empires, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next story. Now let's dive into tonight's tale. The air inside the compound was heavy with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen and the quiet hum of machinery that never ceased. Marcus Hale sat cross-legged on the cold floor, his back against the wall of his cell, the tips of his fingers stained dark with ash. He had scavenged the remnants of burned food pellets and used them to sketch on the concrete, dragging lines that curved and bent into shapes his captors could not understand. They called it nonsense. To Marcus, it was memory, a fragment of earth preserved in black smudges. Across from him, Elias Ward leaned against the bars, his gaze flat, eyes dulled by months of monotony. Once a soldier, Elias still carried the bearing of discipline, but the spark had drained from him. He watched Marcus without comment until the scraping sound of the cell door opening broke his silence. Commander Veyrix entered, his angular frame draped in the sleek armor of the Xerath Dominion. His presence was imposing, not only from the ridges of bone that crested his skull but from the stillness he carried. The Xerath believed movement without purpose was weakness, and Veyrix embodied their creed with unnerving precision. He stepped forward, gaze fixed on the floor where Marcus's drawing sprawled like a map of forbidden thought. "What is this filth?" Veyrix's voice was sharp, cold, layered with contempt. Marcus looked up, unflinching. "It's a river. From my home. It cut through the city like a silver blade." Veyrix's eyes narrowed, his voice lowering to something more dangerous than shouting. "You are forbidden from creating. You were told. Expression breeds chaos. Chaos fractures order." Marcus's lips curved in a faint smile. "Maybe order is what needs fracturing." The blow came fast, a backhand strike that sent Marcus sprawling, ash scattering across the floor. Elias flinched but stayed silent, jaw tightening. Marcus pulled himself upright, a smear of black across his cheek, and met Veyrix's glare with defiance. "You think your scratches matter?" Veyrix asked. "Your kind is conquered. Your earth burns in our archives. Nothing you etch on this stone will change that." "They matter to me," Marcus said, steady now. "And to anyone who sees them. You can erase walls. You can erase bodies. But you can't erase what a man remembers." For a heartbeat, silence pressed against the chamber. Elias shifted, his gaze flicking between the two, torn between fear of reprisal and the pull of Marcus's certainty. Veyrix finally turned, his stride crisp, his voice echoing as he left. "If I find this again, human, your hand will be severed." The cell door closed and the lock hissed into place. Marcus exhaled slowly, shaking his bruised jaw. Elias stepped forward, crouching by the fading marks on the ground. He traced a line with his finger, hesitant. "You shouldn't push him. They'll kill you." "Maybe," Marcus said, gathering the ash into a small pile again. "But they won't stop me. Not until I've put every memory I have into these walls." Elias frowned. "What good is it? Pictures don't change anything. Guns win wars, not scribbles." Marcus's gaze softened, almost pitying. "You've forgotten what they're really afraid of. Not our weapons. Not our numbers. They're afraid of the part of us they can't touch. The part that sings, paints, builds. That's what they're trying to bury." Elias leaned back, his shoulders pressing against the bars. He wanted to argue but the words caught in his throat. A memory tugged at him unbidden, the sound of his mother's voice humming when he was a boy, a melody he had not thought of in years. He shoved it aside. Survival was simpler without ghosts. Days blurred together but Marcus kept at it. Ash, dirt, even the condensation gathered from pipes. Anything became pigment. He drew faces, landscapes, symbols that Elias didn't always understand but couldn't ignore. Other prisoners began to glance through their bars, whispering among themselves. The marks on the walls spread like veins, threading life back into the sterile stone. It was during one of these hushed gatherings that Elias spoke again, low enough that only Marcus could hear. "You're going to bring the overseer down on all of us." Marcus kept sketching, a circle growing into the outline of a sun. "Then let him come. Better to die remembering what we are than live as the hollow things they want us to be." Elias stared at him, unsettled by the calm in Marcus's voice. He wanted to scoff, but instead he found himself watching the crude sun take shape. The line of prisoners along the corridor leaned forward, eyes hungry for something they couldn't name. Later that night, when the compound was dark and the guards silent, Elias woke to find Marcus still awake, tracing invisible lines on the floor with his fingertip. "Why don't you ever stop?" Elias asked. Marcus looked at him, a faint light in his tired eyes. Because if I stop, they win. Elias had no answer. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the machines. For the first time in months, the silence did not feel empty. It felt waiting. By morning, the marks had been scrubbed away, the walls returned to blank sterility. But something lingered in the air, a residue of defiance no cleanser could erase. When Veyrix passed down the corridor, he noted the prisoner's eyes. They were no longer flat. They watched him now with something dangerous flickering behind them. He paused at Marcus's cell, his gaze settling on the human's unbowed posture. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned sharply and left, his steps louder than usual, as though to drown out a thought he did not wish to hear. Elias followed Marcus's gaze to the freshly scrubbed wall. Though the drawings were gone, he could still see them in his mind's eye, the river, the sun, the faces. He hated to admit it, but they had lodged inside him like splinters. Maybe you're right, he muttered, almost to himself. Marcus didn't look up, but the ghost of a smile crossed his lips. The compound hummed on, unaware that its silence had been broken. The first crack had formed, thin but undeniable, in the armor of the Dominion. And though no one spoke it aloud, everyone in that corridor felt it. Something had begun. Marcus worked with a quiet intensity, his hands blackened from scraping soot into powder and mixing it with the thin layer of condensation that dripped from the prison pipes. The crude mixture clung to the wall in strokes both deliberate and desperate. He painted a figure standing on a jagged cliff, arms raised toward a rising sun. Around him, prisoners leaned against their cell bars, their eyes fixed on the growing mural as if it were the first taste of water after endless drought. Elias watched from his usual place, jaw set, arms folded. He wanted to scold Marcus, to remind him that punishment would be swift and merciless, but the words stuck. Instead, he studied the painted sun as it took form, glowing faintly under the dim prison lights. Something in it stirred unease in him, as though the memory of warmth was dangerous in a place so cold. The quiet reverence was shattered when the metallic doors clanged open. Guards entered, their heavy boots striking rhythm into the silence. The prisoners retreated instinctively, but Marcus remained where he was, brush of ragged cloth still in hand. The lead guard, his armored frame reflecting pale light, froze at the sight of the mural. He barked an order, and two soldiers rushed forward, scraping at the wall with electric rods. The image smeared, the sun collapsing into black streaks. The watching prisoners groaned, a sound too low to be defiance but too heavy to be dismissed. Marcus did not move even when the rods hovered near his face. Commander Veyrix entered last, his expression unreadable. His gaze lingered on the ruined sun before turning to Marcus. "You persist in this indulgence," Veyrix said. His voice lacked the sharp certainty it once carried. "You risk not only yourself but all who watch you." Marcus stood, wiping soot-stained hands on his tattered clothes. "Then punish me. But you'll never stop it. Not here, not anywhere." Veyrix's jaw tightened. He signaled for the guards to leave the wall unfinished, the black smear standing as a scar across the stone. For a fleeting moment, his gaze lingered on it, as if he saw more than what had been destroyed. He turned abruptly and left, the door hissing closed behind him. Elias released the breath he had been holding. "You're insane," he muttered, though his voice trembled less with scorn and more with awe. "Maybe," Marcus replied, settling back against the wall. "But insanity might be all we have left." That night, whispers carried through the prison like wind through cracks. Prisoners repeated the story of the mural, embellishing it as it passed from cell to cell. Some claimed the sun had glowed brighter than any lamp, others that Marcus's figure had looked like a god. Even the guards, stationed at their posts, traded quiet remarks, their voices tinged with something close to curiosity. In the darkness, Elias lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Against his will, the image of the sun rose behind his eyes, stubborn and clear. He turned over, restless, but the warmth it suggested followed him, unshaken. Days later Marcus began again. He drew not just rivers or suns but faces, men laughing, children running, soldiers raising their hands not in war but in greeting. The other prisoners crowded closer, their eyes drinking in every stroke. Elias tried to stay detached, but he found himself leaning forward, straining to catch the details. The guards arrived sooner this time, but instead of instant destruction, one lingered. A younger Xerath soldier, his posture uncertain, stared at the face of a child Marcus had drawn. His hands twitched at his sides as though resisting an impulse. The moment passed quickly. He barked an order and tore the sketch from the wall, but his hesitation had been clear. When the guards left, Elias turned to Marcus. "Did you see him?" He didn't want to wipe it away. Marcus nodded, voice quiet. It's reaching them. They don't even know it yet, but it's in them. Elias felt a strange thrill, fear tangled with a spark of something he had long buried. If that's true, it's more dangerous than you realize. Marcus's expression hardened. Good. The next day, punishment arrived. Marcus was dragged from his cell, beaten, and thrown back hours later, bruised and bleeding. Elias caught him before he collapsed, easing him to the floor. You can't keep this up, Elias said fiercely. They'll kill you next time. Marcus's swollen lips curved in a faint grin. Then I'll die knowing I left something they couldn't erase. Elias wanted to argue, but his voice failed him. He thought of the young guard staring at the child's face, and for the first time in years, he felt the faintest pull of belief. That night, while Marcus slept fitfully, Elias found himself dragging his finger along the wall, tracing the outline of a crude star. It was clumsy, little more than scratches, but it glimmered faintly in his mind as though it mattered. He wiped it away before Marcus woke, but the act lingered in his chest like a secret flame. The compound grew restless. The prisoners whispered louder now, their eyes brighter. Even silence seemed different, charged, alive. The guards barked orders with sharper tones, uneasy in ways they could not explain. And Commander Veyrix, walking the halls, felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing against him. He paused once at a smear of soot left uncleaned on a wall, his hand hovering over it before he pulled away as if burned. The following morning Marcus emerged again, weakened but unbowed, hands already reaching for ash. Elias caught his arm. They'll kill you, he repeated, softer now. Marcus met his gaze, steady and unwavering. Not before they've seen what I have to show them. Elias let go. His chest tightened with a mixture of dread and anticipation. When Marcus's hand pressed soot to stone again, a shiver passed through the corridor. The prisoners leaned forward, their breaths held, and even the guards hesitated at the door, waiting. The first line of a new mural appeared, and in it, a promise of something larger than walls, larger than fear. The air seemed to thrum with it, as if the compound itself were listening. And though no one dared to say it aloud, all who watched knew it. The battle had begun, and it carried no weapons but memory and the stubborn refusal to be silent. Rumors spread faster than the guards could silence them. What began as whispers in the prison corridors trickled outward, carried by low-ranking soldiers on rotation, by administrators who lingered too long near Marcus's cell, by the uneasy silence of those who had seen his work but dared not speak openly. The Xerath Dominion prided itself on order, yet order could not contain the pull of curiosity. Something intangible was seeping through the cracks, and it unsettled everyone who felt it. Marcus worked tirelessly, his body bruised and frail but his spirit untamed. Every wall that was scrubbed clean became a new canvas. His hands, calloused and stained, moved with a kind of ritual urgency, as if the act of creation itself was a rebellion. Faces appeared, luminous and stubborn, drawn from memory. A father watching his son take first steps, a group of men around a fire, comrades raising a toast. The images glowed with life even when made from soot and dust, as though the stone itself remembered what it meant to feel. Elias no longer tried to dissuade him. Instead, he found himself guarding Marcus, standing between him and impatient guards, or distracting others with feigned compliance. He did not understand why he did it, only that something had shifted. Where once he saw futility, he now saw possibility. And it scared him more than death. Commander Veyrix watched the transformation with growing unease. Reports reached him of soldiers privately mimicking human drawings, some scratching symbols onto their armor, others humming strange tuneless sounds that resembled the human act of song. His superiors demanded results, accusing him of weakness, insisting that discipline was fracturing under his watch. He assured them control would be restored, but their eyes narrowed with suspicion. In the privacy of his quarters, Veyrix studied a piece of smuggled fabric where Marcus's charcoal lines had once been drawn. It depicted a bridge over water, a simple human structure. He traced it with his clawed finger, unable to understand why the image unsettled him. He remembered, faintly as a child, drawing forbidden shapes in the dust before his hand was struck raw for it. He had buried that memory long ago. Now it clawed its way back, unbidden and dangerous. One evening Marcus unveiled his boldest work yet. Using pigments stolen from alien machinery, a luminous residue that shimmered faintly in the dim light, he painted across the prison's central wall. The mural was vast, sprawling from floor to ceiling, depicting humans standing against a storm, faces lit with unbreakable resolve. The colors glowed in the gloom, casting shadows that seemed alive. Prisoners gasped, some falling to their knees as if in prayer. Even guards froze, transfixed. When Veyrix entered, the chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the mural's glow. He looked upon it, his expression unreadable. Every eye turned to him, waiting for the inevitable command to destroy it. His hand lifted slightly, the words forming on his tongue, but he stopped. He stared at the painted faces, each one filled with defiance that no chains could mute. For a long moment he did nothing. Then, in a clipped voice, he ordered the guards back to their posts. The mural remained. The prisoners erupted in hushed murmurs once he left. Elias turned to Marcus, disbelief in his eyes. "He let it stand," he whispered. Marcus nodded slowly, though his face showed no triumph. "Because it's already inside him." That night, the prison pulsed with a strange energy. Men who had long forgotten how to hope whispered in their cells, telling each other what they had seen, repeating the details as though afraid the image would vanish without their words to anchor it. Some Xerath guards lingered outside cells, listening. One even asked Elias in halting human speech what the painted storm meant. Elias answered cautiously, but inside he felt a tremor of victory. The next morning, Veyrix stood before his superiors, accused of negligence. They demanded executions, demanded fire and blood to restore fear. Veyrix listened, his jaw tight, but gave no promises. As he returned to the prison, he felt their suspicion pressing heavier than chains. He knew his loyalty was fraying, though he had not chosen it. He had only stared too long at something he could not erase. Meanwhile, Marcus's influence deepened. He spoke to prisoners not with fiery speeches but with quiet conviction, telling them stories of Earth as he painted. His words wove images as vivid as his drawings. Cities lit at night, oceans crashing with fury, laughter spilling from crowded rooms. Men closed their eyes, carried back to places they thought they had lost forever. Even Elias, who had tried to bury memory, found himself haunted by the warmth of home. Still, danger grew closer. Punishments increased. Supplies dwindled. Guards struck harder, more viciously, but the prisoners bore it with an unsettling calm. For every mural destroyed, 3 more rose. For every bruise, more whispers spread. The Dominion could not stamp it out. Every attempt to crush the spark only fanned it brighter. One night, Elias awoke to find Marcus staring at the glowing mural. "You've lit a fire," Elias said quietly. "But fires consume as well as warm." Marcus turned, his face shadowed but resolute. "Then let it consume. Better that than this silence." Elias had no reply. He only stood beside him, staring at the mural, feeling both dread and pride war within him. The following day, a ripple passed through the compound. Guards hesitated at their posts, prisoners stood taller, and even the air felt charged. Marcus's defiance had become something larger than himself. It had become contagion. Veyrix walked the halls, rigid as ever, but when his eyes fell upon the glowing mural, his stride faltered. For the first time in years he felt unsure of which side he stood on. By dusk, the Dominion's grip had already loosened, though none dared say it aloud. The prisoners sensed it in the guards' hesitation, in the whispers that slipped through the corridors, in the silence Veyrix carried like a wound. Something irreversible had begun, and all who lived within those walls knew it. The prison had become a furnace of tension. Every breath carried the weight of waiting, every silence throbbed with the sense that something vast and irreversible was about to break. Marcus painted by day and whispered stories by night, his body weakening with each beating yet his spirit burning brighter. The luminous mural still stood in the central hall, untouched despite orders, glowing like a wound that refused to close. Prisoners drew strength from it, and even the guards lingered near it, their eyes betraying questions they dared not voice. Elias felt the change most keenly. Once he had been numb, a man hollowed out by defeat. Now he was restless, caught between fear and a growing conviction. He stood at Marcus's side not out of pity but loyalty, his disbelief slowly giving way to faith. Watching Marcus, he understood that strength was not only in weapons but in the refusal to surrender what made one human. Commander Veyrix carried the storm within him. His superiors had demanded executions, public, brutal, final. Yet each time he walked the halls and looked upon the painted faces, he felt his certainty splinter. The human's defiance gnawed at him, not because it threatened order, but because it awakened something he had buried long ago, the memory of creation, of imagination, of self. He had crushed it once to survive the Dominion's creed, but Marcus's art had unearthed it, raw and insistent. The order arrived one cold morning. Veyrix was to execute Marcus in front of the prisoners as a warning. The message was clear: extinguish the spark or be consumed by it. He entered the central hall with guards at his side, Marcus dragged before him in chains, Elias straining against the bars of his cell as he watched. The prisoners pressed forward, their silence deafening, their eyes wide and unblinking. Veyrix stood over Marcus, who knelt bloodied but unbowed. "Do you understand?" Veyrix asked, his voice strained, his hand tight on the ceremonial blade. "Your defiance ends here." Marcus lifted his head, his bruised face illuminated by the faint glow of the mural behind him. "No," he whispered, his voice steady despite his wounds. "This is where it begins." Elias gripped the bars until his knuckles whitened, every muscle in his body taut with helpless rage. Around him, the prisoners began to hum, low and trembling, the sound strange and alien in that place. It grew louder, voices merging, rough and broken but unmistakably human. A song was forming, not polished, not harmonious, but fierce and alive. The sound filled the chamber, reverberating through the metal and stone. Veyrix froze, blade trembling. The song struck him harder than any weapon. It carried memory, longing, defiance, everything the Dominion had forbidden. He saw in Marcus not just a prisoner but a mirror of what he himself had lost. His hand faltered, the blade dipping toward the ground. "Finish it," one guard urged, voice sharp with fear. "End him before it spreads further." Veyrix looked at Marcus, at the glow of the mural, at the prisoners singing louder now, their voices rising in waves. For the first time in his life he disobeyed. He dropped the blade, the clang echoing like thunder through the chamber. Gasps rippled through both prisoners and guards. Marcus's lips curved into a tired smile. Elias shouted in triumph, his voice swallowed by the chorus of men singing, their defiance now unrestrained. Guards hesitated, weapons drawn but hands shaking. Some lowered them, caught in the grip of something they could not name. "Enough," Veyrix said, his voice carrying through the storm of song. "This ends not with death but with truth." He turned to the mural, his hand trembling as he touched the glowing paint. His armor seemed to weigh heavier than ever, but his voice was steady. "The Dominion is afraid of this because it cannot control it. And neither can I." The guards nearest him faltered, uncertain. The prisoners' voices surged, the song now filling every corner of the compound, vibrating in the walls, in the bones of all who heard it. The Dominion's silence was shattered. Elias pressed his forehead to the bars, his chest heaving with exhilaration. He had never believed Marcus's art could amount to more than a gesture. Now he watched as it bent the will of their overseer, as it turned fear into hesitation, hesitation into rebellion. Marcus struggled to his feet, swaying but refusing to kneel. His voice joined the song, raw but strong, and the prisoners roared louder. The guards could no longer drown it, could no longer pretend it was nothing. One by one, weapons clattered to the floor, the sound mingling with the music. Veyrix stood motionless, consumed by the moment. He had not freed them, not truly, but he had refused to break them, and in that refusal the first crack split wide across the Dominion's armor. He looked at Marcus, their eyes meeting, a silent understanding passing between them. By nightfall, word of the defiance had already slipped beyond the compound. Guards whispered to other units, prisoners carried fragments of song into new cells, and rumors spread through the Dominion like wildfire. The humans had sung in chains and an overseer had faltered. The story changed as it traveled, growing larger, more defiant, unstoppable. In his cell, Elias turned to Marcus, voice hushed with awe. "We didn't fight with blades and yet we've wounded them." Marcus lay back, exhausted, his eyes heavy but burning with quiet triumph. Because art doesn't just remind us who we are. It reminds them of what they've lost. The prison remained locked, the guards remained watchful, but nothing was the same. The silence was gone, replaced by echoes of song and the memory of a mural that still glowed defiantly in the dark. And in that glow lay the promise of something greater than rebellion, the promise of freedom born not of destruction but of creation. Love humanity versus aliens tales? Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.